this in honor of Dr. Jene. We'll do that. Dr. Jene. How about this? That's right. Okay, we'll go on, boys, in 3, 2, 1. Well, some people draft by average draft position. Why that's a trap and why, well, you really shouldn't trust certain average draft positions. It's the Audible Live here, Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt Waldman. And before we jump into, I just wanted to have some fun tonight, fellas, in terms of we're going to look at average draft position for players. This is on June 3rd, 2021. And then we're going to say, is that too high? Is that too low? Or is that just right? So a little bit of Price is Right on tonight's program, but it literally is the price right for these players? But before we jump in, let's have a discussion about that. And Bloom, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
How much weight do you put in average draft position just when you're, leading up to your drafts?
I think it's important to know because it's how you anticipate whether a player will be available at a certain point in your draft. It's just like the reason that all the NFL teams are scouring our mock drafts that we write. Not because they agree with us or think that we know so well what they're going to do, but it gives them an idea of how the draft is going to unfold so they can anticipate who's going to be available. So I think that you should definitely not let it undermine your sense of when a player is worth a pick, because as soon as the season starts, reaches look like values and values look like reaches. It just helps you inform when you should take someone to make sure you can get them. And I think that it gives you also, so you can start to look at ADP, and I'm working on some stuff on this right now, where you can really see the belief of the fantasy football conventional wisdom based on ADP, and then that helps you frame some of the things that you can go counter to for arbitrage, right? And there's more and more ways. I just did You Better, You Bet. It's Nick Costos, I mean, it's just the nature of what we do and what we're tangential to is there's a lot more ways than ever to stake something on your beliefs, right? So like the complaint would be, I don't have my draft until August 27th. So everybody's all caught up by then. Everyone's all caught up. Well, now you can bet on season-long props. You can bet on win totals. You can bet on all these things that if you're ahead of the curve where you see something coming before everybody else, and isn't that what we really want to do in fantasy football, right? Is show everyone, I saw that first.
Right.
Matt Waldman was on Trey Sermon before anybody else. I hope you all got your Trey Sermon shares because it's too late now. Anyway, so I think it's important to know, but it's not something you should ever use as a guide for what you should do.
Okay, Matt, your thoughts on average draft position?
The wolf scouts the herd to know the movement and the direction.
As you look like the wolf on the prowl.
I'm feeling that way. I think we're gonna have, once we get a new moon up here, maybe I can change that. But yeah, I mean, I just think that's really what it is. Is Bloom said it very well, and I just tried to encapsulate it as quickly as I could. But it really is about knowing what kind of drafter you are too. If you're a conservative drafter, then that helps you understand where everyone's going and where you can kind of be just slightly ahead. If you're a more fly by the seat of your pants or maybe someone who's more of a risk taker on that level, then then you can see how far you can see where you really stand out and how you can build a strategy around that. And if you just don't even care about ADP, in terms of when you're picking players, it's still helpful to understand the rules, and these are kind of the unofficial societal rules of fantasy football right here. This is what creates the peer pressure. This is what gets the readers saying, that guy, these experts, they don't know what they're talking about because these experts, are touting this guy here, and it's moving the the arrow towards where this guy should be or where he shouldn't be, and they're rising and falling due to that Sigmund Bloom. He's telling
it's market manipulation. This is the equivalent of Elon Musk tweeting about Dogecoin, right?
Right.
Sigmund, because Sigmund's been talking him up and reminding everybody Trey Sermon, blah blah flipper. Yeah, we've heard it all. So let's jump into it. Just kind of play a little game tonight. And if you're into shows like this one, well, you're a serious fantasy player. But Consistently winning at fantasy football is challenging. It takes time. That's why you need a Footballguys premium subscription that gives you an edge and helps you make winning decisions in less time. Remember, you have a life. We don't. Let us handle the heavy lifting. We'll do the work. You do the winning. It's footballguys.com. Just go there right now, footballguys.com. Click that orange button in the upper right-hand corner that says join now. That'll take you right to the early bird discount pricing. That is footballguys.com. Well, a guy that signed his contract today is Devonta Smith with the Philadelphia Eagles. And there's been several people that make comparisons to Marvin Harrison, Matt, which is interesting for Devonta Smith. I'd like to pick your brain on that. And including Dane Brugler, I believe, had him compared to Marvin Harrison. So Dane says something. We all listen for good reason. Let's talk about the rookie for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that average draft position is wide receiver 55. That's 1201 in 12-team PPR league. So wide receiver 55, Marvin Harrison comparisons. Where do you come down on the guy that just signed his contract today, Devonta Smith?
I think that's pretty well on the mark for where he should go, but I don't think any higher than that until we see him actually perform in training camp. Because one of the things that when you look at Smith, when they talk about Marvin Harrison, is it's the speed, the ability to go up and win the ball, the route running. He's a very savvy player from about 5 yards off the line of scrimmage to the catch point. He's great in that regard. Those first 5 yards is really what's going to make a difference whether he's going to translate to the NFL quickly. And I think it's not about whether he will. I think it's about whether he'll do it this year. And, it's a kind of a two-part thing here. The first part is he does have some difficulty against press coverage. I've heard guys like, David, I'm trying to remember David Crocker, the guy who's the former DB of San Francisco, and he has his own podcast and does some really nice work. And he's been saying, oh, well, you can cherry pick the film and say that he gets, that he gets hung up, but I can show you, 20 more pieces of tape that show him getting free. And that's a really good point. But the point really is that there's a difference between how many times you can check off on a notebook whether he gets free, and which one of those 25 times he checked off were actually meaningful reps that project to the NFL.
Yeah, what's translatable?
What's translatable, and sometimes there's more weight with the 1 or 2 reps that you see than the other, 22 to 23. And with the reps that I saw, that when you talk about projecting towards the NFL, he gets hung up against patient physical corners, and so if a patient physical corner can get some pressure on him early, he has difficulty getting free of that. Now, is it an unchangeable thing with his game? No, he's going to have to learn how to release inside and have a plan where when instead of trying to release outside and get pinned to the sideline, he's going to have to learn to release inside a little bit more. So part of it is just a natural progression of varying up your release plans and being able to still maintain your route and the timing of it and dictate terms, even with a way that a defender is trying to take away something from you and going an alternate way. That may take a year for him to do. Another thing that might take a year is that as much love as there is for Jalen Hurts, because you project his rushing yardage, and if you just project it based on the whole idea of, well, this is what he did last year, let's extrapolate that to 16 games, you're talking about a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football, even if he can't pass worth a darn. And I'm not saying that he can't, but one of the things about his game is that while he has a great deep arm, he does get overly invested in the outcome of a play the longer he has to avoid pressure, and that leads to bad decisions. And I just look at the types of throws that he's going to make in these scenarios, and I don't think that fits very well for Devonta Smith in the deep game. I don't think the deep game is really going to be there for them this year. So to me, he's going to get a lot of playing time, a lot of snaps. I don't know if he's going to get the quality targets to elevate his game inside the 10th round. So I like the 12th round
Okay. Wide receiver 55 for you, Bloom. Devonta Smith, what say you?
Yeah, and I think that what we're going to see with Smith and why I might be hesitant on him is, will Jalen Hurts create any overachievers in this pass offense, right? One of the things that is probably another shoe. It's funny, we can see these things coming in fantasy football, and yet the ADP doesn't always reflect it, right? So Zach Ertz, let's go around the room. Cease, what's the chances that Zach Ertz plays for the Eagles week 1?
0.
Matt, you agree? 0, right? But yet, I don't think you're seeing Dallas Goedert projected that way. I don't know if you're seeing Devonta Smith projected that way. Now, Devonta Smith sure seems like a good candidate to fill the vacancy that's left by Zach Ertz. Obviously, Dallas Goedert's going to get a target bump. You could see Devonta Smith doing that. Now, I'm looking at, thanks James Brimacone and thanks Underdog Fantasy, I'm looking at the Underdog ADP right now, okay? And in the Underdog ADP, best ball, so, people that got some skin in the game, Devonta Smith is going between Juju Smith-Schuster and Jerry Jeudy. Other wide receivers around him would be like Deebo Samuel, Curtis Samuel, both Samuels, Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks, who has some similarities in terms of the scouting report that Matt Waldman was just laying out on Devonta Smith. So, if those are the choices, again, like I love to preach, you're not just drafting a wide receiver, you're drafting a wide receiver quarterback combination. And I just don't know if Jalen Hurts is the type of quarterback, get it out quickly, see that early separation, see that early progression to get Devonta Smith. Ideally, Devonta Smith becomes a player who gets 100 catches, right? It's a volume player, like a Tyler Boyd, who's going a little bit ahead of that tier. So I'm probably passing on him just because I don't see the Eagles' pass offense as an overachiever this year. That being said, I'm open to it because the offensive line is going to have a lot better health than it had last year, and Jalen Hurts hopefully is going to get a clean slate with a new coaching regime and have a chance to show what he can do. So I'm not going to talk anybody out of Devonta Smith, but I don't think he's going to be on a lot of my teams.
Well, that leads me to the conversation and something that I wrote about today at footballguys.com on our newswires about Cooper Kupp. So, Matt, we know that Bloom is correct when he says that you're drafting a wide receiver quarterback combination. Why isn't there more of a boost for who's catching passes for Matthew Stafford? Because it just seems like people are going, okay, Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 21, 505. So is that too high, too low, just right in your eyes? And the story today was Cooper Kupp said that he's doing well. He had a skin and tissue issue thing in his knee, which kept him out in the divisional round back against the Packers in January. He's got no issues afterwards, says he's feeling great as he participates in the offseason workouts. So it made me look at it, okay, we're talking 90-plus grabs, we're talking 1,000, 1,200 yards, whatever the number is. And if you go and say, okay, maybe he doesn't get 10 touchdowns like he did in 2019, but he won't get 3 touchdowns like he did in 2020. So give me 5, give me 7. Isn't that worth more than wide receiver 21 with Matthew Stafford, Matt?
Oh, absolutely it is. I think so. But I think that you have to remember that when you look at Jared Goff back in 2018, when they unveiled this offense, Jared Goff averaged over 8 yards per attempt. And Robert Woods is a guy who I wrote about this week in this week's Gut Check, about players that I think could have, career years. And, Robert Woods had a career year of, a few years ago during that unveiling, and he was averaging 14 yards per catch, and it's gone down 2 yards per catch each year since. And a lot of that has to do with my rant that I had last week about Sean McVay, and some of that is on Sean McVay. Some of that obviously was on Jared Goff and the offensive line, and how that's all kind of intermingled. And the result of that is shorter passes because they can't deal with the pressure and didn't address the pressure that was coming other than throwing 8 million screen passes, And so with a guy like Woods and Kupp, these are two players that now when you have Stafford, who, while his average yards per attempt doesn't seem all that special for his career, the past 2 years it has been on the higher end, closer to above 8 or close to 8. And he's had a better offensive line. And even when he didn't, part of that too is he didn't have any other receivers outside of Calvin Johnson for a long time, and he was running for his life. In this particular, era of his part of his career, I expect him to be in a situation where he's going to handle pressure a little bit better pre-snap. He's going to be able to make plays downfield and be aggressive. And then when you add Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell to the combination,
your favorite guy.
Yeah, I'm telling you yeah, exactly. I love Deshaun Jackson, but yeah, my favorite guy, Tutu Atwell. But you're going to see them stretch the field to the point that you're going to have that intermediate game. There's going to be more space in that intermediate range for Woods and Kupp to work. Also, you're going to also find that Kupp's going to get matched up more often against some safeties or nickel corners who aren't going to be able to handle his routes on certain levels that I think Stafford will be able to target. So I actually like Cooper Kupp, at this point. I mean, I have him set up for, from my projections, I have him at about 91 catches, 1,158 yards, and 9 touchdowns because he was the best red zone threat for that offense with Goff. I think he'll be that way with Stafford.
Right.
He understands how to work open. And Woods, I have, very close, 88 catches, 1,189 yards at about 13 and a half yards per catch, back to closer to where he was 2 years ago, and at 7 touchdowns. Both of those guys, to me, are in store for career years and could be inside the top 15.
Bloom, as you sound like Jamie Foxx talking about skin in the game, let's talk about the average draft position that you're looking at, that you're using, and your thoughts on Kupp sitting there wide receiver 21. Again, if we're excited about Matthew Stafford, as we should be with this Rams passing game, shouldn't that reflect in where people are thinking about Cooper Kupp?
Or at least somebody in this pass offense, or this pass offense in general, right?
Yeah.
I suppose I can start. My current projections for Cooper Kupp, and I'm doing season-long projections of Footballguys this year, 91 for 10, 23, and 5 touchdowns. Interestingly, though, and I think maybe, I don't know if this made the blurb on our newswire, Cease, but Cooper Kupp said something to the effect of today, everybody's learning all the positions. So one play might be me inside, the next play might be Robert, next play it might be Van, next play it might be Deshaun. It might be, he didn't say like next play, but what he's saying is they want to be able to run everything out of every personnel package and formation, right?
Right.
I don't know if that's necessarily good news for Cooper Kupp, because what do we think about Cooper Kupp if he's on the field and he's not playing the slot? I don't know. And what this frames is a larger question of Matthew Stafford is going to be good for this offense, right? Matthew Stafford's going to allow Sean McVay to run the offense he wants to run, which he hasn't been for like a year and a half, right? He put the training wheels back on the offense when he lost faith in Jared Goff about halfway through the 2019 season, which leads us to, Goff getting traded, Stafford coming back, etc. Is it going to be good for Cooper Kupp? How much of Cooper Kupp's spike ceiling games came from, that's Jared Goff's strike zone. That's where, you're thinking of like Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Or TJ Hawkinson. Just those low difficulty, high percentage throws. Basically what Sean McVay would let him do, right? Matthew Stafford, he's going to push the ball downfield. He's going to challenge defensive backs. And does that line up with the strengths of Cooper Kupp's game? Or just does Matthew Stafford opening up all of this in offense make it easier for Kupp to get big gains, make it easier for Kupp to operate? So I think optimism is well-founded, but I'm not sure, and I think this is one of those things where we have to watch OTAs, we have to watch news out of training camp to understand it's not a new offense, but for Sean McVay, I think his freedom to do exactly what he wants to do is there where he didn't feel like it was there before. And I'm not sure that Cooper Kupp is going to be the beneficiary of that, because you add Deshaun Jackson, you add Tutu Atwell, you add a vertical element that clearly Sean McVay didn't trust with Jared Goff.
Right. Yeah, that vertical element, and you buckle up your seatbelts.
Yeah.
So that's for sure. Bloom, I'm going to throw this one at you because I know you're super excited about it. And Matt, I'll anxiously await your opinion as well. I actually saw something that wasn't my @replies, but I saw you tweeted about Mike Williams. with the news that came out about Mike Williams, and it was so good. This is what's always funny. This is a side note, like inside joke. Nobody will get it, but like whenever we get stories twice, I'm like, so good they had to report it twice. That our newswire had to bring up. Big year for Mike Williams? Question mark? Yeah, big year for Mike Williams, but haven't we always been saying that? There was a story at 12:36 a.m. Wednesday, and then at 10:11 p.m. Basically the same story, different outlets, but hey, Joe Lombardi says Mike Williams should post, quote, nice numbers this year. Okay, that's fine. But it just seems like with the way that Williams has flashed, Bloom never put it all together, really. Isn't trusting him as a wide receiver 4 with upside the better play? And then get excited and definitely hear the clues, right? What are always picking up? The drum beats. The drum beat about Mike Williams is an exciting rhythm. It's an exciting beat. I've kind of been dancing to it before, though, and would actually like to see it come to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough to get fed when there's Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. I mean, you're going to always be third in line. And then you have Mike Williams. And the problem with Mike Williams is that he plays at the edge of his abilities, at the very edge, which, because he's a very good football player, means he leaves himself open to get hurt a lot. He plays with no regard for his body. And you just hold your breath a little bit sometimes when he goes up and makes those spectacular catches, because he does that in a way where he doesn't have anything to protect himself when he comes down. But we cannot ignore Joe Lombardi, right? And depending who you ask, this is Matthew Stafford, right? Like Matthew Stafford would say, Joe Lombardi, no. Anybody but Joe Lombardi, right? Whenever it was possible that Stafford was available, it's like wherever Joe Lombardi lands, Stafford's not going to want to go there, right? The same way that he said, didn't he say he didn't want to go to New England? Matt Patricia, right?
Yeah.
Is Joe Lombardi going to be good for Justin Herbert? Is he going to be good for this offense? I mean, they have the best offensive line the Chargers have had in forever. What is that going to translate to? But sometimes the coaches will just come right out and tell us, right? There's a lot of fluff. Everyone's in the best shape. What is it? Everyone's in the best shape of their life. Everyone's right. For a career year.
Right.
But this is Joe Lombardi coming out and saying, as much as this offense will resemble New Orleans, Williams, plays the X, and the ball has always kind of found the X receiver in this offense. Michael Thomas, right? He said, I think there will be some natural production that comes his way because of the nature of the offense, but here's where you really need to listen. He said, I see a big role for him. If I were a betting man, fantasy football is basically betting, I'd bet on nice numbers coming from him on the stat sheet, that's for sure. I mean, he can't come out more directly and say, we're going to give Mike Williams a chance. And they're paying him $15 million. This is a cheap organization. Okay? They could have gotten out of paying. They could have gotten out of paying him 15. His fifth-year option was not guaranteed. And I don't even recall seeing a report that they were mulling it, that they were weighing it. Okay? And so they think a lot of Mike Williams. Joe Lombardi thinks a lot of Mike Williams, or at least thinks a lot of what he can be in the role he'll play in his offense. Mike Williams is going in like the 9th round. Oh, I mean, you're not risking a lot if nothing comes of this. You're not risking a lot if you get like 5 long touchdowns from Mike Williams, but otherwise he's hurt, he's on the injury report, and he just disappoints. I think we were talking Mike Williams with I was chatting on Twitter with Lord Reeves, Rich Rebar, and he said, what I would give for 130 target season for Mike Williams. But whether it's health or whether it's just the way the pie gets chopped up because of Austin Eckler and Allen, we'll see. But that's enough. I can't remember who it was. There was I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but there was a coach who basically came out and said, if I played fantasy, I would get this player. And I can't remember who it was now. But sure enough, if you had just listened to the coach and gotten that player, you would have profited. I mean, the coaches will just directly address us. And that's what Joe Lombardi's doing. And I'm going to listen.
Yeah. And sometimes they tell you the truth, Matt.
Sometimes they do.
Maybe it doesn't happen that often. By the way, our man Henry Muto says he got Williams in round 14 of one of the FFPCs he did last weekend. He's 1201, which is weird because it's the same as Devonta Smith, who we just talked about a little bit earlier. But let's talk about Mike Williams now, Matt, and your thoughts on his average draft position. Again, we're talking about the 50s, wide receiver 54, 1201 for Mike Williams. The potential's there to be a lot more, man.
It is. I think that works for him. I think that's actually a fair spot for him. And while I get the whole Joe Lombardi, we should listen to him. Bloom, just to make a counter argument to make it interesting. If he also Bloom also began that Matthew Stafford said, "I want to go anywhere but where Joe Lombardi is." So that tells us that maybe he isn't someone we should listen to. He's the reverse barometer for all of that. But when I look at Mike Williams, I actually have him projected for slightly more yardage than Jared Cook. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on Jared Cook a little bit because he's 34 and he's old, but tight ends who actually have elite athletic ability tend to play into their mid-30s and play very well. And the thing about what Bloom said that's interesting to me is that Mike Williams plays at the edge of his ability. Well, Mike Williams has to play at the edge of his ability because he's not a speedster. He's just fast enough with that big body, with the long strides to get downfield. And then as a result of that, he's going to have to, pretty much push the limits of what he can do to get the ball because he's not a speedster. And then when you look at how, Justin Herbert has thrown the ball, he had Jalen Guyton average 18 yards a catch. Jalen Guyton is like, a slow Jerry Jeudy. He's a possession receiver. And Tyron Johnson had nearly 20. At least he was a speedster at Oklahoma State, at least considered as such, even though I don't think he ran a fast 40 either at his combine. So when you look at those guys that he targeted for deep plays, I just look at this and I think that Mike Williams is a good player, but he's not really the player I'd want as an X. He's like a nicer version of Michael Jenkins, the former Falcons receiver, in the sense that he's flashier. He can get downfield better than what Jenkins could do back in the day. But when you look at this overall, I don't see how you're going to trump Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, or even Jared Cook, who's going to be running free up the seams, which is something that, again, Herbert likes to target. Most of those plays that he threw for big plays to Johnson and the Guyton last year were in the middle of the field. And now you have a big guy who's faster than those two or as fast and proven, at least. I mean, he's kind of he's like this strange vineyard, Jared Cook when it comes to what he is, because he's like a fine wine that's gotten better. But like at first you're looking at it and you're thinking, I wouldn't drink this, to save my life over the first 3 to 4 years.
Blind.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, during the Jeff Fisher experience, with him in Tennessee, I think we forget that that's like a lifetime ago for him as a career, where he was like, oh, he's going to be great. And then he couldn't catch a ball, and he had so many issues. And now he's like, it's like he's turned into the player that he was always, promised to be. And so when we look at this overall, I just think that Williams is a nice player, and he's certainly worth taking at that stage. But I'm just looking at him as, he's going to get me points, and anything more than that is a bonus, and that's fine. And if he can outplay expectations, great. But if Joe Lombardi's word starts to get him inside like the 7th round, yeah, forget that. I'm not going there.
Yeah, I will quote John Elway and say, "Good for you, bud." Sorry, Matt. I know you hate Elway. Anyway, Bloom, why are people sleeping on Jamar Chase? I mean, they just are. Just are. And you look at the average draft position, both Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins going above Jamar Chase. Now, Higgins at wide receiver 27, 608, 12-team PPR. I saw Boyd on here. Wide receiver 32, 704, 12-team PPR. So you got, a couple of wide receiver threes-ish in Higgins and Boyd from just average draft position. And then wide receiver 46, 1005 for Jamar Chase. This is one of those things, like, here we are in June 3rd, August 3rd. What's he going to be, Bloom? 25? Like, right. Seriously, I cannot understand with his everything. I mean, he's got everything. And that nose for the end zone, the connection with Joe Burrow, like, wide receiver 46. If you're drafting now, you're getting a value.
Yeah, and I think that if you want him, you probably need to be ready to take him in the 4th round at this point. And I don't necessarily think that's too ambitious. Looking at underdog right now, he's 47.8, so he's right at the end of the fourth round. And I think you're just going to see, like you said, people are sleeping on the potential. It's just like Kyle Pitts, right? People want to look at previous rookies, or people want to compare this to previous situations. And much like the Kyle Pitts situation, has there ever been a wide receiver taken in the top 5 and ending up with the quarterback that made him like one of the most efficient wide receivers in college football? I can't think of another situation, right? And Burrow said already, like, they know what each other are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if we really believe him. Look, Burrow lobbied for Chase. This is an offense that when Burrow was in last year with the ghost of A.J. Green, they threw the ball to wide receivers 28.4 times a game. 28.4 times a game. I think the Steelers were the only team that threw to wide receivers more often than Joe Burrow did on a per-game basis. So one of the things people need to remember when they're looking at the Bengals is all 3 of these guys can be hits. All 3 of them can be hits at ADP. It's not impossible, not by any measure, that all 3 of these guys are flirting with 100 catches. Maybe not Higgins because he's more of a downfield target. Good buzz around Higgins, by the way.
Yes.
And Boyd's going to catch 100 balls in his sleep.
Why do people think that 3 can't hit? I mean, Cincinnati's defense
because you haven't seen
stinks.
it before. Because people are saying, if I haven't seen it before, it can't happen. Right? What's interesting is the Steelers...
when it did happen, it was Peyton Stokely, Reggie Wayne, and Marvin Harrison. Is that what
or
they're
Steve
thinking?
Breaston, too. I mean, remember, there was the year that Breaston had 1,000 yards.
Or with the Colts.
Yeah.
So,
or with... Yeah. They're with the Vikings.
It absolutely...
The Rams.
I mean, it not only can it happen, this offense is designed for it to happen. But again, the Steelers' top 3. So here's basically the comparison on underdog ADP right now. The Steelers' number 1 is going about a round behind the Bengals' number 1. That is, I think it's Chase Claypool. Like Chase Claypool's going about a round after, or maybe it's Deontay Johnson. I can't remember. But then the number 2 and number 3 are similar. Whether you're looking at Higgins versus Deontay Johnson, or Claypool, or Boyd versus Juju. So both offenses are being projected to throw to the wide receiver like 400 times, right? So it's not difficult to picture an offense. And then again with Jamar Chase, we have a player who's coming into an offense that's going to give him ample opportunity to show what he can do. And maybe, just maybe, in year 3 with the offensive line, with Riley Reif, maybe they have another move in them too. Jackson Carman is going to be, I think, great as a guard to begin with. Also, you got to love, by the way, folks, if you haven't seen it, because I sometimes binge on those videos when the teams call the players, tell them they're going to draft them, like get a little misty-eyed.
It's a human factor, right?
Oh, and Jackson Carman is from Cincinnati. He's from the Cincinnati area. And I'm getting tingles just thinking about this. And he does the call with the Bengals, and he gets off the phone, and he says, this is a room with like 30 or 40 people, and he says, it's Cincinnati. And they just go crazy. They just go bonkers, So you have Jackson Carman, who's a mauler at guard. You've got Reif. Hopefully Jonah Williams turns out to be what they wanted Jonah Williams to be. So you have this offensive line. You have Zach Taylor from that Sean McVay tree. You have the 3 receivers. C.J. Uzoma's looking better. You have Joe Mixon. Remember when we thought Joe Mixon was going to run routes the way that Todd Gurley did at his peak? That hasn't happened yet. This offense, if Burrow stays healthy, could be something we haven't seen before. Again, one of the things I'm trying to think of at this point when we have a 30,000-foot view is which offenses have the greatest potential to overachieve in a way to create multiple overachievers, because we're just underestimating how efficient they'll be, or volume in different areas, things like that. And this Bengals offense has to be better than last year. It has to be. How that will translate to Chase and other receivers or Burrow, I'm not sure. But if anybody is reaching for Chase in the early best ball drafts, I think that he absolutely is being underestimated.
Yeah, that's for sure. Bloom, I'm actually almost counting on Joe Mixon to get hurt, which will lead to more passing game. And, anybody else, Samaje Perine's not going to catch a bunch of passes. I know they talk up Chris Evans, but, he was great in Captain America. Anyway, Matt, let's discuss this situation with Chase and those expectations for the Cincinnati Bengals this year, and, why people are so fearful of it. And also, this is for both of you, so Bloom, it'll go back to you. But Matt, isn't it almost this time of year when you can do your clearest thinking? as a fantasy football analyst. Like the draft is done, in mini camps and OTAs, but it seems like training camp and we're getting the clues. It's faster, but the news is frenzied. Like now when you have time to kind of exhale after the draft, when you can kind of look and forecast, and there's some things going on. Where does Julio Jones land? Is it with Seattle? Is it with Tennessee? What have you? There's those type of things, but it's almost like this time of year, before the line starts or before the information becomes too much for people, it's almost like there's clarity. There's your drink tonight, Bloom. Matt, your thoughts here. Chase, clarity, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, because you stated it very well in terms of why this is a good time of year. The key is as an analyst is not to be influenced again by things that you shouldn't be influenced by, so that you kind of stick to your guns with certain things. And that can be a bigger test than actually new information. I mean, there's some important information, but it's learning how to discern it. And that's the most difficult part. But here's the thing. The reason, the biggest thing that you can learn, I think, today as a new fantasy GM, if you're new and listening to us, and I would say this, we'll continue with the wolf theme. The wolf at the edge of the herd, in the forest or in the brush, is listening to them drone on these words: too many mouths to feed, too many mouths to feed. If you're in a league where you hear someone say too many mouths to feed, just go ahead and, start shopping for whatever it is that you're going to use that winnings for. Don't buy it yet, but at least you should start looking around, because even last year, the most common too many mouths to feed argument that last year was the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
Now people would say that and say, well, look what happened. Well, we're talking about process, folks. Keep your nose on the process, eyes on process. Okay. Process, not results, process. Now, before Dak Prescott got hurt, the guy who was going to be a victim of too many mouths to feed was going to be CeeDee Lamb, who was basically on the verge of being a wide receiver one at, just before Dak Prescott got hurt. But he was supposed to be the victim of that. CeeDee Lamb could play inside and outside. He's a fantastic route runner. He's rugged after the catch. He's rugged at the catch point. Sounds kind of familiar to me when we start talking about Jamar Chase. And Chase and Tyler Boyd are going to be switching back and forth inside, outside oftentimes because of the fact that Chase can play split end, flanker, and slot. And they're going to find, optimal matchups for him. I expect Jamar Chase to lead this team in targets. I expect him to be second in catches to Tyler Boyd, because Boyd's going to get some of the more higher percentage targets and convert a little bit more of them. But he's going to also lead in yards and probably lead in touchdowns as well. And I think all three players, as Bloom said, I think all three of them are going to go over 100 targets. And it's going to be Chase and Boyd who are going to have the two highest, and Higgins' target percentage is going to be lower just naturally due to his function in the offense. But all three are either, at the value they should be at or below the value they should be at. And I'm excited about Jamar Chase. I think he, Rondale Moore, and Jalen Waddle are values this year in terms of rookie receivers that we should be targeting at various areas.
Elijah Moore.
Bloom, as you hear my alarm go off because I'm on the air in 15 minutes, but I'm on the air right now. Your thoughts about this time of year? Just being more clear for everyone.
Yeah, it is where you can get in, whether it's best ball drafts or making certain bets on team wins or season-long props and things like that, where you can get ahead of the curve, where you can lock in, hey, on June 3rd, I saw this was coming before the conventional wisdom caught up to it. I think even in OTAs, you're going to see things that start to alert people to things. I think you can even right now, if you have strong beliefs about the Julio Jones trade or Zach Ertz, you can get ahead of those things. So this is a good time to not feel like the herd got a chance to catch up to you.
That's a wrap for tonight's program. Light and sweet and short and sweet. Tonight. It is the Audible Live. Everyone check out footballguys.com. You do all the winning. We'll do the work. Check us out, footballguys.com. And thank you all very much for subscribing to our YouTube channel and our plethora of shows that are for your enjoyment. He's Sigmund Bloom. Follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. There's Matt Waldman at Matt Waldman. We keep it simple at Cecil Lammey. And at the Audible, I am Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned and stay frosty.
Mike Tanier, that plethora was